Barron Trump is the youngest son of former President Donald Trump and his wife Melania. Despite being in the public eye because of his family, Barron has largely stayed out of the spotlight. He's not as well known as his older siblings, and not much is often said about him. For the most part, Barron has remained private, attending school like any other teenager, with little attention drawn to his life. But his quiet nature doesn't mean he's free from the gaze of the public. People are curious about him, and some wonder what life must be like for a child of someone so famous. But here's the thing. Barron is just like any other teenager. He deals with schoolwork, friends, and the daily challenges of growing up, all while carrying a name that's hard to escape. It's a regular school day, and Barron is just another student among many. He's walking through the halls like everyone else, trying to blend in. The other students don't know who he is, at least, not yet. Barron's not dressed in any fancy clothes or acting differently from anyone else. To the other students, he's simply another kid walking through the school's corridors. The thing is, even though Barron is a regular teen, there's something special about him. But today, no one knows it yet. As he heads to his class, the world around him doesn't know that he's not just another student. They don't know he's Barron Trump. They're about to learn in the most unexpected way. The group of students in this story isn't anyone special. They're just a handful of teenagers, hanging out together between classes. They're not part of the school's popular crowd, nor are they the ones who excel academically or athletically. They're just regular kids looking for a little excitement in their lives, something to break up the monotony of school. They have a reputation for being a bit rebellious. Not in any serious way, but enough to stand out. They like to push boundaries and test limits, often finding themselves in trouble for things like skipping class or causing minor disruptions. But their biggest way of seeking attention? Teasing others. It's what makes them feel noticed, even if it's at someone else's expense. Most of the time, they target kids who seem different. Quiet kids who keep to themselves, or those who don't speak up. They think it's harmless, just a way to pass the time and get a laugh. But underneath all their joking, there's a need for validation. They want to be seen, heard, and recognized, even if it means putting someone else down. Today, like any other day, they're walking the halls, laughing, and looking for their next target. They're not malicious, but their teasing is often harsh. It's just how they get by, how they feel in control. They have no idea that today, their attention will fall on someone who, unbeknownst to them, is different from anyone they've ever picked on before. Someone they'll regret teasing once they realize who he really is. It was a quiet morning at school, the usual shuffle of students rushing between classes. Barron Trump walked through the hallway, blending in with the crowd. He wasn't wearing anything that stood out, no flashy designer clothes or noticeable accessories. Just a regular hoodie and jeans, his hands tucked into his pockets. He walked with a calm, almost detached expression, his eyes focused ahead, like he was simply going through the motions of another school day. The group of students, lounging near their lockers, didn't notice him at first. They were busy talking among themselves, laughing and making jokes, the kind that filled the halls with the usual noise of teenage energy. It wasn't until Barron passed by them that they took a second glance. One of the students, a boy with a short, spiky haircut, noticed Barron's height. He was noticeably tall for his age. "Look at this guy," he muttered, elbowing his friend beside him. "What's he trying to be? Some kind of tough guy?" His voice was loud enough for Barron to hear, but he didn't flinch. The group looked him over, sizing him up. He didn't seem to have any friends with him, and his face was neutral, almost impassive. To them, he was just another kid. A little different, maybe, but not enough to make him stand out. They didn't recognize him, didn't know who he was. "Hey, you lost or something?" one of the girls called out to Barron, laughing as she spoke. She crossed her arms and leaned against her locker, a smirk playing on her lips. Barron kept walking, his pace steady, but they weren't about to let it slide. The teasing started small, a comment here and there about his clothes, his awkward gait, or the fact that he looked like he had no idea what was going on around him. They made fun of the way he looked, assuming he was just another shy, awkward kid trying to make it through the day without standing out. "Yo, Someone teach him how to dress, one of the guys snickered, his voice echoing down the hallway. The group laughed, feeling a sense of power in their harmless teasing. They thought it was all in good fun, just another quick laugh at the expense of a kid they didn't know. What they didn't realize was that the boy they were mocking wasn't just any other kid. And soon enough, they would find out the truth. But not before things got a little more complicated. The teasing didn't stop with a few comments. Once the group saw that Barron wasn't responding, they took it as an invitation to push further. They began to circle around him, getting bolder with each remark. It started with his clothes. His hoodie didn't match the latest trends, and his jeans looked like they came straight from a discount store. "Man, what's with that hoodie?" one of the guys laughed. "You trying to be a rapper or something?" "Newsflash, this isn't a music video." The group chuckled, and Barron continued walking, his head down slightly, his expression unchanged. He didn't look up, didn't even acknowledge their words. This only made them more confident. "Seriously, are you lost?" another student asked, now standing in front of him, blocking his path. "Did your mom dress you this morning, or what?" The others joined in, each taking their turn to pile on the ridicule. They mocked his hair, his posture, the way he seemed so quiet and distant. Everything about him became a target. "You look like you're trying to be a loner or something," a girl teased, nudging one of her friends. "What's the deal, too cool for everyone else?" They made fun of how Barron held his backpack, how he walked with his hands stuffed in his pockets, how he seemed to avoid eye contact. To them it was all material for a joke, something to laugh about as they went on with their day. And as Barron remained silent, they felt more and more empowered. They thought they had control over him, that they were somehow making him feel small or insignificant. "What's wrong, dude?" another student piped up, moving closer. "Cat got your tongue?" Barron didn't flinch. He didn't fight back. His eyes stayed focused ahead, his shoulders slightly hunched as if he was simply trying to get through the day. But the more he remained calm, the more they pushed. They thought they had won. They thought they were breaking him down, getting a rise out of him. What they didn't realize was that Barron wasn't bothered by their words. He wasn't bothered because he knew something they didn't. He knew they were nothing to him. But they still saw him as just another kid to bully. They had no idea who he really was, or how little their teasing would actually affect him. To them, Barron was just an easy target, and they couldn't have been more wrong. As the group continued their mockery, one of the students, the same boy who had elbowed his friend earlier, paused for a moment. His eyes narrowed as he took a closer look at Barron. There was something about him that seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The tall frame, the serious expression, the way he carried himself, it all seemed oddly reminiscent of someone, but he couldn't place it. The boy leaned in a little closer, studying Barron from a distance. And then it hit him. The hair, those sharp, dark features. He looked just like someone he had seen on TV before. He felt a chill run through him as the realization began to sink in. Could it be? "Wait a minute," the boy muttered under his breath, stepping back slightly. "No way." The others, who were still laughing and poking fun at Barron, didn't seem to notice. They were too caught up in the moment to realize what was happening. But the boy's mind was racing. He quickly searched through his memory, trying to confirm his suspicion. Barron's face flashed in his mind, those familiar features, the jawline, the eyes. It was Barron Trump, the son of Donald Trump. The student's stomach dropped. He couldn't believe it. He had been mocking the son of one of the most famous figures in the world, and he hadn't even known it. The weight of the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. "Wait. Is that Barron Trump?" the boy blurted out, his voice barely above a whisper. His words seemed to freeze the group in place. The other students stopped laughing and turned to him, their faces filled with confusion. They didn't understand at first, but the boy's expression said it all. He quickly pointed at Barron, his eyes wide with shock. "Guys, that's Barron Trump, the president's son." A silence fell over the group. Their faces shifted from amusement to disbelief. They began to look at Barron differently now. He wasn't just some random kid they could tease. He was him. The realization hit them all at once. They had been laughing at, mocking, and bullying someone who was not only the child of a high-profile political figure, but also a person they had no right to treat that way. Shock set in. The fun and games stopped. What they had thought was harmless teasing now felt like a huge mistake. The group stood frozen, their eyes wide with realization. It was as if time had slowed down. The laughter that had filled the air moments before suddenly felt out of place, harsh and rude. Each of them stared at Barron, who remained calm, unaffected, his face still holding that neutral, almost detached expression. The weight of their words sank in like a heavy stone in their stomachs. Embarrassment washed over them, quick and overwhelming. Some of the students exchanged uncomfortable glances, their faces turning red as the realization hit them full force. They had been making fun of someone with the kind of power and influence that none of them could even imagine. They had no idea they were bullying the son of a former president, and now they were left to deal with the aftermath of their ignorance. Oh my God, one of the girls mumbled, her eyes shifting nervously. I didn't know. She trailed off, unsure of how to even begin to apologize. I didn't mean to, another student stammered, running a hand through his hair, but the words didn't come out right. How do you apologize for something like this? A few of them shuffled their feet awkwardly, unsure of how to act now. The teasing, the comments, they all seemed so petty, so meaningless in light of who Barron really was. They thought they were just picking on some random kid, but now, in the cold reality of the situation, it felt wrong. The guilt started to build up, gnawing at them. Some of them wanted to speak up, to say something, to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. They had pushed Barron too far. Too much had already been said. And now, in the face of the truth, it felt impossible to make things right. One of the guys, the one who had first made fun of Barron's clothes, shifted uncomfortably. Look man, he said, his voice quieter now. I didn't know. I'm sorry, alright? We didn't mean anything by it. But the damage was already done. Even as he spoke, the words felt empty. Barron hadn't responded, hadn't reacted, he just stood there, letting their awkward attempts to apologize wash over him. The group was left standing there, with their regret hanging heavy in the air, knowing there was no way to undo what had already happened. They tried to laugh it off, to backpedal and pretend like nothing had changed, but deep down, they knew it was too late. They had crossed a line, and nothing could take that back. Barron didn't say a word. He didn't raise his voice or show any sign of anger. He didn't react in any way that could have fueled the situation further. Instead, he stood there for a moment, his posture unchanged, eyes still focused straight ahead. There was a calmness about him, an unbothered presence that seemed to contrast sharply with the flustered and embarrassed group around him. As the students fumbled with their words, trying to offer apologies or backpedal, Barron simply nodded slightly, acknowledging them without much emotion. He didn't smile or show any sign of relief, but he didn't seem upset either. It was as if he had already processed everything and decided it wasn't worth his energy. Without missing a beat, Barron turned and continued walking down the hallway, his steps steady and unhurried. He didn't need to say anything. His silence spoke volumes. The group watched him leave, each of them feeling the weight of the moment. They had expected a reaction, maybe some anger or frustration, but Barron had given them nothing. It was as if they hadn't even fazed him. And in a strange way, that made everything worse. The more they tried to apologize, the more they realized that Barron wasn't affected by their words at all. His calm demeanor, his ability to move on without a second thought, left them feeling small and foolish. As Barron disappeared down the hall, his quiet confidence left a lasting impression on the students. They would remember how he didn't need to respond, how he handled the situation with grace and maturity. It was a powerful lesson they would carry with them, one that showed them just how much strength there was in silence and composure. Later that day, as the students sat in class, their minds wandered back to the incident. They tried to focus on their work, but it was hard. The events of the morning kept replaying in their heads. Each time one of them thought about it, the embarrassment grew deeper. They couldn't stop thinking about how they had treated Barron, how they had made fun of him without knowing who he really was. The boy who had first realized Barron's identity sat at his desk, staring down at his notebook, but his mind was elsewhere. He felt ashamed of how easily they had picked on someone, not caring about the consequences. The others felt it too. They had laughed and mocked a kid they thought was just like any other, but now they realized how wrong they were. They hadn't seen him as a person, just a target for their jokes. And that stung. None of them spoke about it though. The subject felt too awkward to bring up. They didn't know how to address the situation, especially now that it felt so much bigger than their childish teasing. They could feel the weight of what they had done, but no one wanted to be the one to bring it up. So they went through the rest of the day in silence, pretending like it didn't matter. But it did. They couldn't forget what had happened. The whole incident lingered in the back of their minds. It was a quiet, uncomfortable feeling, something they couldn't shake off. They knew they had acted out of ignorance, and the regret weighed on them. They would never forget how easily they had crossed the line. And deep down, they knew they wouldn't be able to look at Barron the same way again.